This is Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Avav, and today's learning and the learning for the entire month of Elul has been generously sponsored as an incredible Schos Aliyas Neshama for Asarezel Basar, a mayor whose yard site is on Shabbos on the day of today's Daf Kiddushin Avav. B'siyata d'Shmaya, though every word of Torah, Talmud Torah, Kenegekulam should bring Asarezel Basar, mayor higher in Gan Eden Shamayla, closer to the Kisei HaKavod. It'd be an incredible Meilat Yosher for an entire family and for the entire Chabura. We pick it up on Hey Amid Beis, and we're approximately 12 lines from the bottom at the two dots. And Shmuel really picks off in really complete continuation of the end of the previous year. Says Shmuel, Amar Shmuel, Kiddushin, when it comes to Kiddushin, Nasan la kesef v'shava kesef, you give her money or that which is worth money of Amar la, and you say to her, Harei ad mikudeshes, you're hereby married. Harei ad mizuras, you are betrothed. Harei alila into, you are to meet a wife. Harei zu mikudeshes. Then what's the halacha? The halacha is they are indeed married. But continues Shmuel, and the flip side, if they say, if she says, Hareini Isheich, I am your wife, Hareini Ba'alech, you are my, excuse me, she's not talking. One more time. If he says, she's not talking, that's the next line, I skipped. If he says, Hareini Isheich, I am your spouse, Hareini Ba'alech, I am your husband, Hareinu Aruseich, I am your Arus. So he's talking, but he's talking from his perspective. Ein kan beis mechosh. It is absolutely nothing. V'schein, and similarly begerishin. By gerishin we find similar nasan law if he gives her a get. V'amar law, and he says to her, Harei mishulach, as you are sent away. Harei miguresh, as you are divorced. Harei mitaris chol adam. You are permitted to any man. What's the halacha? Again, he talks and addresses her future status. That is the way a get works. However, if he says, Eini Sheikh, I am not your husband, Eini Sheikh, I am not your spouse, Eini Ba'alech, I am not your husband, Eini Arusech, I am not betrothed to you, then Ein Kan Beis Mechosh. So Shmuel really mimicking and picking up from where we ended off in yesterday's shir, teaching us that the way that a Kiddushin, the way that a Gerushin is effected is via giving the Kesef and giving the Shtar respectively. And the husband addressing the wife's status, Hariat Mikudesh, as you are married, etc. Asks the Gemara, Amar Leira Babala Abaye, 4 lines on the bottom. From that which Shmuel just said, we can infer the following. Lememra, it seems to say, even though it's not absolutely clear that which the husband says, sounds like it works. Because he didn't say Harei Mikudesh as li. He says you are married. So it sounds like even though it's not perfectly clear, it still is Yodayim. It's still, we know what it's talking about. But the kasha is, V'atanam, we learned in the Mishnah, 3 lines on the bottom of Hamid Beis. If someone says that, hey, I will be Harei Zen Nazir, it means he's going to be a Nazir. And we contemplated and pondered and we wondered, why? If you just said, hey, it doesn't mean you're a Nazir, Vidilma, and perhaps, hey, B'tainis. Maybe what he meant is, I'm going to be in a fast in a Tainis Kamar. Va'omar Shmuel. And Shmuel was the one that explained 2 lines to the bottom, that what is the case? The reason he is a Nazir, because it was a Nazir passing in front of him, and therefore extrapolates the Gemara clearly. What's the reason that saying hey makes a Nazir? Because there was a Nazir passing by in front of him. But if there was no Nazir passing in front of him, it would not work. So what do we see? It's a case of Yadayim she'einan moichicha. It's Yadayim. The only case it's going to work is if it becomes perfectly clear. Is by making it Yadayim moichichais. But if not, it's not going to work. Explains the Gemara, Hacha b'may yaskina and da'amar li. The case is, he says, Arei at mikudeshes li. It's perfectly clear. Ask the Gemara, Yachi, if that's true. Maika mashmalan. What's the chiddush? Explains the Gemara. As we turn over to today's daf, Vav Amid Aleph Hani Lishna Basroi Kamashmalan. You're right that the first half of Shmuel's statement is indeed not a chiddush at all. What is the chiddush of Shmuel? The chiddush of Shmuel is the end of his statement, in which he said, I am Irini Bayalech, I am your husband, or I'm not your husband. That is the chiddush of Shmuel. But Einachanami says the Gemara, the first part, which is Arei Mikudeshes Li, that is indeed not a chiddush at all. Says the Gemara, Hachak Sev, with regard to Kiddushin, it says Ki Yikach. Now we understand why Shmuel's statement, where did he get this din from, that has to come from the husband, and he has to say it from the wife's perspective, because it says Ki Yikach, he shall take, V'lo sheyikach es atzmai, and not that he should take himself to her, but rather he takes her as the wife, that the pasuk addresses it in the form of him talking to her. Excuse me that the highlighting is not working. I think that should make it better. V'hacha over here, kiseh v'shalcha, similar by get, it says, and he sends her away. V'lo sheyishlach es atzmai, and not that he sends himself away from her. So each pasuk clearly refers to the husband in relation to the wife, and that is where Shmuel gets the din, that is what is necessarily. And we continue with the third line, Vavam and Aleph, Tanu Rabbanan, it says the Gemara. What is the story if a man says to his wife, Arei at ishti, you are my wife, Arei at rusasi, you are my arusa, Arei at kinuya li, you are acquired to me, mikudeshes. Harei at shali, if he says you are mine, Arei at bershusi, you are my rishos, Arei at zikukali, you are attached to me, mikudeshes as well. Ask the Gemara of Lesnau Kulu Kechada, why did you list 3 different cases? Just say it all one list of 6. Answers the Gemara, Tana Talatas Shaminu. The Tana heard them in groups of 3, Vikarsin, and he learned them, of course, hearkening us back to the fact that Torah Shabal Peh is indeed just that, Torah Shabal Peh. Therefore, the Gemara is recorded and read in the way that Talmidim used to repeat over the halachis. Ibayilahu continues the Gemara. What is the halacha of a husband, a man, not husband yet, a man says to a woman, you are miyuchedes, you are singled out to me. Miyuedes li, you are designated to me. Miyuchedes li ma'u, miyuedes li ma'u, ezrasi ma'u, you are my helping, negdasi ma'u, you are my counterpart, atzurasi ma'u, you are my gatherer on salasi ma'u, you are my rib, sigurasi ma'u, you are my enclosed ones. Tachti ma'u, you are my replacement. Tifusasi ma'u, you are my seized one. Lekuchasi ma'u, you are my taken one. All different l'shainais are these l'shainais of Kiddushin. Says the Gemara, pshait mi'achada. Let's at least address one of this list. The Tanya, we learned in our Braisa. If someone says, you are my purchase, you are my lekuchin. What is the halacha? The halacha is areat Mikudesha, Arezu Mikudeshes, they are indeed married. Why? Mishum Shenamar Ki Yikach Ish Isha. The pasuk uses the term of Yikach, and therefore the word Lekuchen would suffice as well. Ibayalo continues the Gemara with another shalos. We answered one of that list. Charufasi Mao, what is the halacha? He says Charufasi, you are my Charufa. Tashema Detanya. Haimer Charufasi, says the Braisa. Mikudeshes. Why? Shekain b'Yehuda karin la'arusa charufa. Because in Yehuda, that's the name of a place, they would indeed call the arusa, the one that is did eris and betroth, a charufa. V'Yehuda v'Ruba the Alma says Shkoich. So you've had one place in which they refer to the act of eris as charufa. What does that prove to the rest of the world? Hachi Kamar says Gemara, you're right, that's not what the Gemara meant. If someone says charufasi lachas mikudeshes. Why? Shenemar really is cause of the pasuk. The pasuk says v'yishivcha necharefes lish, because the pasuk says that the yishivcha is necharefes, designated to a man. So we now have a precedent that the word necharefes means designated. Ve'oid, and furthermore, b'yudikar narusa charufa. Meaning, really, we're learning it from the pasuk. We're just adding on that indeed we know that there's a place that does that. Says the Gemara, once you have a pasuk, what do you need a place? Yehuda Likra, which is a very famous statement quoted in Shas, quoted in many drashas, which basically means once you have a pasuk, what is Yehuda? What is telling me that a place does this help me at all? Elochi Kamar, says the Gemara. Haimer Charufa be-Yehuda mikudashes. Once we have a source in the pasuk, and indeed there's a place that does it, then it works. Why? Shekain v'Yehuda karan la'arusa charufa. And so the Gemara wants to conclude that saying charufa would work specifically in Yehuda. Ask the Gemara 1 second. What exactly are the parameters of the case? If you're going to tell me that they're not currently talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin, and he goes over to a woman and says, Charufasi Manayada Maika Amrala. How does she know what he means? So rather, it must be for the fact that he's saying this funny word. It must be that they're in the middle of talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin. And Aval Gav, so they're talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin, excuse me. Says the Gemara, so Aval Gav Amar Lanami. Even without saying that you are Mecharufa, the mere fact that they're talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin, and then he goes and he gives something to her that itself indeed should act as a form of Kiddushin. Ditinan, as we learned in a Mishnah, they're talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin, and then midst conversation, he gives to her Gita V'Kedusha, and he does not explain anything. Even still, Rav Yossi Amar Dayoy. Rav said that's enough. Rav Yehuda Amar Sarach Lefarish. V'Amar Rav Huna Amar Shmuel. Who do we paskin like? Halachic Rav Yossi. So the Gemara is back to square one. What is this case of Charufa? As we say, if we know that they're talking about getting Kiddushin, then of course it's going to work. And if they're not talking about getting Kiddushin, then how in the world do we know what's going on over here? Answers the Gemara. I apologize that the highlighting just went a little crazy. Amri, they said, really what we're talking about, really what we're talking about is that yes, they are talking about Kiddushin and Kiddushin. So therefore, why does he have to say Charufa? And it's true, if he would have given it to her and been quiet, it would have indeed been a good Kiddushin. Sometimes by talking, it makes it worse. Meaning, if they were quiet in the middle of discussing wedding or in the middle of discussing Gerushin, and he goes and he hands something to her, so clearly what's he doing? Clearly what he's doing is whatever they're discussing, which is the Gittin or the Kiddushin. However, the problem here is that he's opened his big mouth. The middle of talking Gittin and Kiddushin. If he would have been quiet in a Chanami, it would have been perfect. The problem was that he gave her something, and he said in this lashon of Arei Churufa Kamar Law. So do we say? Maybe he means that this is a form of malacha, and therefore tekus. The Gemara is concluding, very fascinating, that it's true if he would have said nothing, it would have of course been obvious that is a good kiddushin. But because he opened his mouth, now we have another tzad. Maybe he means to say that he wants her to work for him, and therefore that was the Gemara Shaila, and on that answers the Gemara. Teku, we have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to resolve such a Shaila. And with that, Gufa says the Gemara, let's delve a little bit deeper. Haya Medaber, about 20 lines from the bottom of Vavam and Aleph, first sort of line is Medaber. Haya Medaber, Meisha Liske Gita Vikdusha. If he's in the middle of talking to a woman about Kiddushin and Kiddushin, and then V'nasan la Gita Vikdusha, and he gives her a getting Kiddushin v'loy Pirish, and he says nothing. as we just quoted before, and that's of course what Gufa means, is we're going back to that which we just quoted. Rav Yosi Omer Dayo, it's a good beginning. Kiddushin. Rav Yehuda Merzach Lavarish. No, you have to explain what's going on. Amar Rav Yehuda Mer Shmuel V'osha Asukin Ba'isai Inyan. That which Rav Yosi said is only when they're dealing with that Inyan. However, if they digress to another topic, then it would not indeed be a good gain or Kiddushin. Now the Gemara says, what does this mean? Ketanoi, this is indeed a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi says, Rav Elazar ben Rav Shimon even though if they're not talking about the actual Gittin and Kiddushin at this moment, still it will function as a Gittin and Kiddushin. Ask the Gemara, the obvious kasha. If they're not actually talking about the Gittin or Kiddushin, how in the world does she know what he means? He just says this random statement. How does he know? How does she know what he means? Amar Abaye explains to Abaye inyan le'inyan, ba'isa inyan. That what's going on is they're sort of talking about it. You know, you're in the middle of one conversation, you jump to the next. Rashi says, what's going on over here? They stopped talking about the actual Kiddushin, talking about other things, but it's things involving the couple. How much is going to be the Nadunya? How many fields are you going to give? What support are you going to give? So they're not talking about the Kiddushin, the marriage itself. They're talking about the areas surrounding the Kiddushin. That was the whole discussion. It concludes this part of the Gemara. Rav Huna Mar Shmuel. Halachic Rav Yosi, that is how we pass. Maybe Rav Ashi, V'ladam Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Kol she'eni yodeh b'tiv gittin and kedusha le'yesek imayen. Anyone who doesn't know anything about gittin and kedusha, you have nothing to do with it. Afil lo shmiya le'ad Rav Huna Mar Shmuel. Do you have to even know this statement? Meaning, this halacha that for a Rav to get involved in gittin and kedusha, you have to know. You have to know. I mean, this is in all areas of halacha, but there's a specific emphasis. Kol she'eni yodeh b'tiv gittin and kedusha. If you don't know about gittin and kedusha, you should not be getting involved in gittin and kedusha. So ask the Gemara, do you even have to know this one member of Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel? And he responds, Amar Lei, says Rav Ashi, Ein achanami, yes indeed, you have to know this halacha as well. Continues the Gemara, quoting from that which Shmuel taught us a few moments ago, V'chein begerushin. And so too by gerushin, and Rashi on the last line fills us in that this is similar to Amar Mahar. Meaning we're going back to what Shmuel said, V'chein begerushin. So Rashi keys us in. It's the same thing as the Gemara would have said. Amar Mar v'chein begerushin. Explains the Gemara. Nasal nagi tav amar l'rei mishach zer migerush tavim tavs chol adam harei miguresh. All these cases, it is indeed a good divorce. Says the Gemara. Pshita. The following is opposite. Obvious. Nasal nagi if he gives her the actual gad v'amar lo le'ishtoi. And he says to his wife, Arya Bas Chayrin, he hands her the get. Instead of saying, Arya Migureshesli, he says, you are a free woman. That is obvious that what? Eloi Amar V'loi Klum. That saying she's a free woman does not connote necessarily divorce. But what about on the flip side, asked the Gemara. Amar Lo L'Shivcha Soy Arya Mutares Chol Adam. What's the story if someone goes over to Shivcha and says to her, you are mutter to any man? What is the status of that case? Asks the Gemara. Excuse me. Then as well, what if he said to his wife, what's halacha? Me Amrin on 4 lines down. Do we say that when he tells his wife, you are to yourself? Maybe he's freeing her entirely. He's actually divorcing her. Another Ravashi. Toshima. Let's bring a raya from a brayso. The Tani learned in a brayso. Kufa shall get shecher. What is the text of a document of emancipation of an eved? Arayat bas chayrin. You are free. Arayat lascha. You are to yourself. Hashta also says Ravina, proving his point. When you have an Eved Kanani, you own the body of the Eved itself, and yet, when you say you are to yourself, it's a full-fledged severance that this evidence by themselves, Kamarla. Isha dol kanale gufe, of course, one does not acquire the actual body of his wife. Lo kol shekei, so wants to prove Ravina that similarly it should work if he says Ariat la'atzmecha. Omar le Ravina le Ravashi, so Ravina accepts this as an answer, continues with another shayla. Omar la'avdai, what if he says to his Evan, ain't the Isek I want nothing to do with you? What's Allah in this case? I'm going to do we say in the Isek Bach legamri, that he's telling his Evan, I don't want anything to do with you entirely. Kamerle Odelma. He just means I don't want you to work for me, but of course he does not give up the ownership of the Evan. Amrle Rav Nachal Ravashi, Rav Nachal responds, Rav Chanan Mechuzai Ravashi Toshima. Hamoich Harav Delakum, when someone tells his Evan to go, what's the halacha? Yatzal Cheiros, the Evan goes free, but the original master has to as well write him a document freeing this Evan. So Amar Ashbag and Rishim Gamliel explain what's this referring to. Bamedvar Mamurim, you know this is referring to Shlo Kasav Lo Oinoi. So when he did not write for the Evan a document, that is indeed that which is freeing the Evan. Oinoi, echidami oima. He says, what is this case of oinoi? I'm Rav Shishas to chazlach shativrach mimani. Ein li esabach. When you run away from me, I have nothing to do with you. So we see that since this tax works out similar to regular shtar shechur, so we see that ein li esek bach also connotes that he's fully freeing the person. Therefore, we have an answer to Ravina's original shayla. Amar Abaye, we're at the two dots. Smack him made about 20 lines from the bottom. First one line is Einli Esek Bach. Says Abai, Hamekadesh b'milva einoi mikudeshes. Says Abai, if someone marries a woman with a loan, what is halacha? Einoi mikudeshes. Reuven lent Rachel money, and then Reuven says, Rachel, you know what? Instead of paying me back, let's get married. Halacha is Eina Mekudeshes. But if he says the benefit to the hana of the loan, which we'll see in a moment what that means, then Mekudeshes is indeed a good Kiddushin. But Asr Lasas Kenyan Allah do this Neharamas Ribbis because it looks like Ribbis. He says the Gemara, what is this case that he's marrying her with? The benefit of a loan. If you're going to tell me that the case is that he lent her the money and he had a fixed payment that she had, that he had, that is, he told her that instead of paying me back 4, pay me back 5, and now he's saying that the 5th coin I'm not going to take. The hana is going to be as if I got that extra coin and we'll be married. Says the Gemara, Ribbis Valyasi. That's real Ribbis. He lends her 4, that she has to pay back 5. That's 100% Ribbis, and therefore it does not work. And therefore there's no way you can marry her with that final coin. Void, and furthermore, says the Gemara, Hainu Milva. Is this a case of Milva? Why would Abai say it's good? To explain to the Gemara, the case is which he gave her extra time to pay back the loan, and then he says, with that benefit that you're getting, that you don't have to pay back the loan right now, but rather you can pay back in the next amount of days. Let's be mikudeshes with that benefit. That's the case that we are talking about. And we finish with a statement of Rava. Omar Rava, about 12 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Omar. Hey, look, mana almanas shetachziru ali b'mecher. Someone says, gives money to another person and says, take this mana on condition you return it to me. B'mecher loikana. If the money is being given as a sale, then there's no transaction, and therefore there's no kinyan at all. Be'isha, if it's given for to marry the person, ain't a mikudeshes. B'pinyan aben, ain't b'nai padoy, the child's not redeemed. B'truma yatzei de'nesina, it's called giving. But Vasalaskim, they should near Kikoyin, Hamisai Sagranis looks like the Koyin is getting extra. So says the Gemara, Mike Kosavar, what is this din of a Rava? Right, Kosavarava. Iksavarava, Matan Amanas Lachs, Shma Matana. If you're going to say that anytime you give a gift like this, she gives it back, it's called a Matana, then in all cases it should work. If you look Kulinamu, it should work. So what is Rava hold about Matana Manas La'achzer? Furthermore, Rava the Amar. Rava is the one himself that says Matana Manas La'achzer is a good Matana, Shma Matana, Damar Rava. You take this Esrog condition, you give it back to me. No, he takes it Vachzira Yatza, he still yates the mitzvah of Esrog. Lav Lo Yatza. So what is this din of Rava that if he gives her a mana manas to give it back, it's not a kinyan b'mecher, doesn't work by Kiddushin, doesn't work by Pidyon Ben, etc. Elam Rav Ashi, Bekulu Kani, they all work. Lebar Meisha, why? Shenisha Nikdas v'chalipin, as we've seen, you cannot acquire a woman with chalipin with exchanging something. This is a form of exchange. They say this over in the statement of Rava in your name. Pick it up with the Rava on the last line of Hava and Beis B'siyata Dishmaya.